On May 25th, new EU data rules come into force to strengthen the data rights of EU residents and harmonizes data protection law across all member states. For the past few months, the General Data Protection Regulation, or GDPR, have been a talk among companies across the world. But what is GDPR? GDPR is a regulation that requires businesses to protect the personal data and privacy of EU citizens for transactions that occur within EU member states. It was adopted in April of 2016 and executed in May of 2018, and non-compliance could cost companies dearly. Here's what every company that does business in Europe needs to know about GDPR. The GDPR protections apply to all individuals within the EU and non-EU companies that control or process data from individuals in EU. This means that not only industry giants like Facebook and Google need to comply, even small industries also fall under the scrutiny of the Act and must comply with the regulation. Companies now need to request explicit consent from their EU members to collect and use their personal data. In case of children below the age of 16 years, parental approval is necessary to collect their data. Any sensitive data that can be linked directly to an EU member falls under personal data. EU citizens now have the right to know what data is collected on them and for what purpose. What constitutes as personal data? Basic identity information such as name, address, and ID numbers. Web data such as location, IP address, cookie data, and RFID tags. Health and genetic data. Biometric data. Racial or ethnic data. Political opinions. Sexual orientation. Who must comply? Any entity that has a preference in an EU country or any entity that is storing, collecting, or processing the personal data of EU citizens and has more than 250 employees. Fewer than 250 employees, but its data processing impacts the rights and freedoms of data subjects, is not occasional, or includes certain types of sensitive personal data of EU citizens. Companies have to appoint a data protection officer who will be responsible for making sure the company complies with the guidelines. All breaches must be notified to the authorities within 72 hours of its occurrence. Penalties for non-compliance of GDPR. Penalties for non-compliance of GDPR conditions ranges from 12.4 million or 2% of annual global revenue, whichever is higher for low-level offenses, and 24.8 million or 4% of annual global revenue, whichever is higher for higher-level offenses. Residents can contact the data controller whose information is provided at the time of the collection of the data to get the information on their data. Citizens of EU have every right to remove their data under the right to be forgotten provision, and companies must abide by their decision. Companies are now becoming more considerate towards users' personal data and are trying to prevent any future breaches. Individuals now have the right to know where and for what purpose their personal data is being collected, used, or processed. Giants like Google and Facebook were hit with several GDPR privacy complaints within hours of its induction. Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Facebook, says, in quote, "I think everyone in the world deserves good privacy protection." Says he added that it's worth discussing whether something similar to GDPR should indeed be applied in the US.